Let's get down to focus of the day: economic issues, the interest rate issue, and aviation sector. Well, a Nigerian pilot, Isaac Balami, wants promoters of the upcoming Nigeria Air to consider maintenance of aircraft locally. He believes that the country would save about $500,000 annually from local aircraft servicing. Lillian Ezemak spoke to him.
With an approved maintenance organization sited in Nigeria, operators of Nigeria Air and other airlines will likely heave a sigh of relief, especially as the cost of servicing aircraft keeps rising. Aviation stakeholders have identified lack of maintenance, repair and overhaul facility locally as a prime contributor to the failure of many airlines in Nigeria over the years. High cost of maintenance abroad is also attributed to capital flight and shrinking of fleet size of domestic airlines.
First of all, the cost of labor for an average Boeing 737 is between $500,000 to $700,000 US, cost of labor alone. So at the end of the day, you know, the airlines could also save a lot of money, at least because that 3-4 days that they will save, because if you are going to do the checks here and it's to last for 4 weeks, you don't have to add plus 4 days for transit. Roll the aircraft into the hangar, if it is in Lagos or Abuja or whatever, roll it in and start your maintenance.
Besides airline operators benefiting from the local MRO, this labor leader is optimistic that indigenous, young and unemployed Nigerians will have cause to smile.
There is need for other airlines to come into that. And whether you like it or not, this federal government, part of what they say they will do, job creation is part of it. And if they can be able, if people can be able to get jobs, I think that everything will be okay. But the security situation in Nigeria, most of 80% of the reason why there's insecurity in Nigeria is lack of jobs.
The insurance company will also have confidence on our operators. We used to gist, and it's so sad that sometimes you bring in an aircraft into Nigeria, the moment you change the aircraft registration to Nigerian 5 November registered, the aircraft loses a value of $2 million US the day you change the registration. Because those insurance companies, they look at so many factors. So their risk increases whenever they fly into West Africa. By the time we are doing well and insurance company can see that we have a standard maintenance facility in the country, they know that we are safe and that the airlines will have access to maintenance, to spare part and whatever, and it will also reduce their downtime.
While some stakeholders have asked the government to provide enabling environment to secure the survival of the MRO, others want Nigerians in the diaspora to return home to support the country's efforts to float and maintain a successful national carrier. Lillian Ezemak, TVC News, Lagos.
All right, let's discuss this development in aviation sector and other economic issues. And joining me to do that in the studio is Paul Frimpong. He's an economist and also the head of Africa Chartered Global Investment Analyst. Many thanks for your time, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Paul, by the way, is all the way from Ghana, and we will be doing some form of comparison today between Nigeria and Ghana. But Paul, let's start with this. The man that you heard the report there said, if airlines are serviced locally, we could make as much as $500,000. Well, that's in Nigeria. Is that so, really?
Thank you very much for having me, and glad to finally be in the studios of TVC News. The aviation industry across the continent has its own unique challenges. Hello. Really, from even international aircraft that flies to most countries in Africa, down to local airlines that we have. So when you look at the trend, time and time again, obviously local airlines faces the severe of those challenges, because then the capacity of the international airlines are not the same as the ones that we have locally. So if you look at where they fly from and where you have to maintain your aircraft, because it's a very unique equipment that you use. First of all, the aircraft are not actually manufactured here. It's not close to any country here. So obviously, you do not have the background equipment that were used, technical knowledge, expertise that we use to manufacture the aircraft. You don't have it locally. So obviously, you end up going back to the source where you purchased the aircraft from for all those kind of other services, which costs huge amount of money. But then there's the issue of transfer of skills. Once you have your route open and you have the means, like you have purchased your aircraft, obviously you know there's going to be a maintenance cost, because this is not even cars, vehicles that we have on our roads. At least every 2-3 months you need to take it to the workshop for maintenance, just so that you are secure, let alone flying something like this in the air. So it's not a cost that you can overlook. Obviously, it will come down to the fact that you need to service your aircraft at every point in time when you have the opportunity.
Yes, as you rightly said, a lot of fund is needed to keep the aviation sector going. If you have to invest in that sector, you need a lot of funds to be able to do that. And we've been following the trend in Ghana. I saw the airport that's been constructed. Very beautiful, just like an international airport.
Indeed.
And from what I was able to gather today, there has been the launch of, there's been a procurement of navigation equipment in that sector. But Nigeria is looking at having a national carrier. Well, the blueprint has been launched. It was launched recently in London, and I do not know if Ghana has a national carrier. But it seems that Ghana is able to achieve what it's achieving in that sector because the government is seeing or has the vision of what it wants it to be. Now, tell us, what's your assessment generally of the aviation sector?
Yeah, so rightly so, Ghana recently launched the Terminal 3, which looked very new and very modern, with a lot of technology and easing congestions at the Kotoka International Airport, and also saving time, of course, with a lot of gates being open now, so it's obviously reduces the congestion at the airport. Now, in terms of national airline, Ghana government is actually on the process of doing that, already contracted consulting firm KPMG to actually look into the cost-benefit analysis, whether it's prudent that Ghana has its own national, because we've had it before, and the history is that it was wrongfully managed, so we lost it. In the long run, some of the aircraft is now being used as a restaurant somewhere in the capital. So obviously we have that tendency. Of course, it's a pride, right? You've seen Rwanda Air, you've seen the Gambian Ethiopia Airline, Kenya Airways, all of these airlines. It's a national pride. But then time and time again, we've seen how we consciously or unconsciously mismanage some of these state organizations. Like we collapsed Ghana Airways in no time. So it's a discussion the government of Ghana is having to see how they can actually have its own national. But in the midst of that, you see the broader picture or broader vision of trying to make the international, the Ghana as a hub for West Africa or Africa in general, which is of course the vision of what Nigerian aviation also having. Now, recently we saw in Africa launching the single African air transport market, the SAT, exactly, which is supposed to open up the skies for more routes and for lesser restrictions, increase more of the flight, and then reduce, and the competition will increase, and of course the flight cost and everything will come down. So these are all initiatives that are very exciting, because then if the aviation sector does not work, it's going to affect tourism as well, because then how am I going to move from where I am to that country if I want to visit? Assuming I want to come to VI or Lekki or something. I'm from Ghana or from Rwanda. How do I get to Nigeria if I do not have access to either cheap or reliable or safe aircraft? I mean, to come to Nigeria. So it's a broader vision that we've seen across the continent. Some have already taken the, like you mentioned, Kenya, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Gambia, all of them, Namibia, they've all, South Africa, already enjoying, even though challenging, but then they are still surviving, because it's not easy to compete and to have public servants being able to manage such state institutions, because we've seen the record, it's very bad. We are very bad in managing such state institutions. So in the long run, we need to walk the talk. I mean, how do you ensure that even the local airlines are being protected? Okay, how do you ensure that you do not allow multiple entry routes to international aircraft? How do you ensure that routes that are meant for regional aircraft movement are not given to international airlines? How do you ensure you walk the talk? Because then, if you do not have the capacity to grow your local aircraft industry, I mean, there's no way you can have the skill set that you need. These international aircraft, they are flying from outside, they are maintaining from, of course, you get some few employing some few number of Africans. If you are lucky, most of the crew and everybody is not from here. So obviously, they are creating jobs elsewhere, yet they are using your route, and yet we are using. So
really, Paul, how do we address this kind of challenges?
Yeah, so basically, that's the simple step that the government of Ghana has taken. Obviously, it's good you want to have a national airlines, but you need to get the basics right. How are your airports being developed? Okay, what is the capacity that you have? Because in as much as you want to have the pride, you want to say, okay, this is Nigerian Air, this is Ghana Airways or Ghana Air, whichever name that they are proposing. You want to make sure that the basics are right. At the end of the day, you've done something before, it failed. Okay, so how do you ensure that those things does not happen? The cost of flying, okay? You have a situation where to move from one African country to the next, you have to land in Middle East or Europe before you come back into Africa, which is unheard of. I mean, how do you build an aviation industry in this regard? Flying from one country, one African country to the other, and have to stop over in Asia or Middle East before I come back to Africa. So if the foundations are not right, for example, some of the regulations that are meant to protect the local industry, local airlines, it has to be implemented. The issue about taxation is very huge. I mean, when I did the calculation of even my flight from Accra to Lagos, taxation alone is almost...
Honestly, it's so worrisome in that area, especially in that aspect. When we talk about consumption, I don't think we do consume that will need to be taxed in that manner, especially in the aviation industry.
Yeah, indeed. So for me, the basic, the fundamentals has to be done. The authorities that are in charge, the airport project that has to be done, the safety of our airports. Getting access to good quality ratings to make sure that it attracts, because at the end of the day, we are talking about boosting the economy, creating jobs, contribution to the aviation industry, directly and indirectly through the tourism industry to the GDP of the entire economy. So it's that simple that we need to work on this aviation industry.
All right. We'll be talking about, we'll leave the aviation industry for now. We'll talk about the interest rate regime. We'll see what it is like in many African countries on the continent, especially the West. But we'll talk about that after the break. We'll take a break now. When we return, we'll be talking about the interest rate regime, and especially with the report we took earlier, where the CBN is asking that banks give out loans to the agricultural and the manufacturing sector at 9%. That's a very impressive one, but that will be after this break. You're watching Business Nigeria. All right, you're watching Business Nigeria. Glad to have you back. I've been speaking with Paul Frimpong, and he's been talking about the aviation sector. All right, let's talk about the interest rate regime. Ghana, we also know, is part of that African country that has its interest rate at double digits and high at that.
That's true.
Yes, and Nigeria is working at bringing its own down to about single-digit interest rate. But with this latest development with the agricultural manufacturing sector, it wants the commercial banks to bring it down to 9% lending to those sectors. But what's it like in Africa? It seems we all love double digit.
Yeah, it's pretty sad, if I should say, that we have banks having to lend to people that need access to funds at such interest rates. Obviously, the banks has their reasons, because the risk factor is very huge for them, where you give money to people, and even how to even locate them is not easy, because I mean, access to data is very minute. So you have some of the banks, when you read their reports, you see that loan default rate is very high. So obviously what they have to do is to charge more to the few that they can get, because obviously if they give to 100 people, the underlying assumption that they have is that maybe just about 20 or 30 are going to pay.
All right,
so
all
then
right. Paul,
yeah.
Paul, I would like you to hold your thoughts. I need to talk to our correspondent at the Nigerian stock market, who is standing by to bring us details of transactions today at the NSE. Hello, Ekop.
Hello, Yamisi. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yes, it was a 4th straight day low downward trend. What was it like today?
Indeed, the market performed so fine. The index moved up 1.87% in the afternoon, to the surprise of so many other people. Let me turn to Charles Fadroka, who is a dealer from Foresight Securities, to tell us why the market had to surprise us. Charles, welcome.
Thank you very much.
For the first time this week, and we did not expect it, and it went above 1%, nearly to get to. How did it happen? What happened?
Yes, for every market, we've always said it's dynamic. Market will go up, market will come down. So today, the forces of demand and supply has come to play, and the bulls have taken over. That's why we see that the market went up today.
We see that those who benefited from today's greenish trade included Airline Services, Veritas Capital, Japo, and Wema Bank. Interestingly, this has come on a day that a foundation is being unveiled in honor of Oscar Onyeama. Did that foundation unveiling play anything on the trading floor?
Of course, social events and other events can affect the market, and the positivism that accompanied the unveiling of the Oscar Onyeama's foundation impacted positively in the market. That's not to say that was the only factor. Of course, the demand and supply in the market still played a major role in what we saw today.
Let's look at that foundation properly now. Oscar says he's coming up with this foundation to be able to support indigent children in indigent communities across the country. And it's also to mark his 50th birthday. Just position that action, and what do you think of it?
Yes, I think the young man, when he came, sorry, I'm calling him the young man, when he came to the exchange some years ago, probably 2011 April, we knew that this was the right choice for this job. And we are not surprised looking at all the innovations and the things he has brought to revive the market. And we operators are very, very grateful to what he has done. So him coming out with this foundation to coincide with his 50th birthday, it's a kudos to him, and the dealing member community will always continue to support him and ensures that we move the market forward.
We have so many rich people in Nigeria, and we have many foundations that we cannot even begin to count now. Some of them, soon after launching, they get down. This one, I believe, will, succeed somehow. Let's look at how foundations are treated, especially in developed economies. We remember and we know of Ford Foundation that has endured, generations.
After 80 years.
So foundations like this one, what economic contribution does it make?
Yeah, if you know the person of Oscar Onyeama, you know that he's a very detailed and very intelligent young man. And whatever he's doing, he makes sure that he has done his own work. And of course, you also recall he's an advocate of sustainability of stock exchanges. So I'm sure it's going to bring that sustainability to his foundation. Because if he lives here, it's a legacy. And I believe because of his attitude, because of his temperament, because of his expertise and his intelligence coming to play in that foundation, the foundation will continue even after he has left. So I think it will be sustained.
While the ceremony lasted, I saw so many stockbrokers beaming with smiles. I mean, you were internally happy and emotionally connected to him and the event, even the board members. Will he take any definite support from you, the professionals?
Yeah, we have always supported when we see a good talent. And Oscar Onyeama has shown that, yes, he's carrying along all the stakeholders. Everybody is attuned. Every policy, every innovation that comes to the market, all the stakeholders are carried along. That's why you see this immense support the community of stockbrokers are giving to him. I will continue to give him that support.
Charles, let's leave it there. Many thanks for coming on this occasion.
Thank you for having me.
Weekend transactions at the stock exchange. It surprised many people that the market that has stayed low since Monday nearly hit 2% on this day. Back to you, Yamisi.
All right, Fionga, it's good that Oscar is having a hold on the Nigerian stock market, but we cannot go on. We would have loved to go on, Paul, to talk about this. Unfortunately, we do not have enough time. But we so thank you for your time on Business Nigeria today.
Thank you for
and wish you safe trip back to Ghana.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's Business Nigeria. Thank you for your time. I am Yemisi Lanre Ido.